All right, and we're back. And we had a little bit of an exam this morning. It didn't go so well for some people. So I want to do a little bit of a recap on some of the stuff that was done. So let's take a look at the file. I want to take a look at the, because I don't want people to wait around. That's why I'm doing this. So let's look at the midterm. So what were you asked to do? Again, I talked to you when you were doing the midterm. I was talking about, there's some options you have there. You don't have to exactly do everything the way it says it here, because I want to give you some flexibility. This is your basic abstract class, Lotto Game, and you have a couple of arrays that I kind of indicated here. One is element array, which is what holds the final 6 numbers or 7 numbers or 10 numbers, however many you want. And this is number array, which is the number of element, the number from in your set. So again, a set would be between, let's say, 1 and 49, and your set size, depending on your set size, right? So now this thing's going to be definitely labeled differently. Random is your random number generator. You could have put it at the top. Some people put it in the middle. That's fine too. It's just a place to hold your random numbers. Of course, your set size is how big your set is, 1 to 49. So that would just hold a 49 or 45 or 50 or whatever, that one number, an integer. Same thing with element number. How many how many elements are in your set? 3 numbers, 5 numbers, 10 numbers, how many? Right, kind of thing. All right, so that's what this thing is. And what you were asked to do is you put together a Lotto Game abstract class, and from there you derive a second class called Lotto 649. And you use this thing called iBonusNumber, which is also a public abstract bonus number, has a bonus number method, and it's just a contract. So it's a very simple one to get. Those 4 marks should be easy to get, right? So let's take a look at some of the stuff. When you get your Lotto Game, you're going to get a subclass. The subclass is going to be called Lotto 649. So really, when I look at my project file and I'll look at the one that has the array method, you have the following classes. I have an iBonusNumber.java, I have a Lotto 649, I have a Lotto Game, and a program.java file. Okay, so let's take a look at the my program.java file. This is where I would start. It's this. That's all it is. That's all I have in my program.java file. So the program.java file, all it does is it instantiates an object of Lotto type, Lotto 649 type. I called it Lotto. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't take any parameters, right? Because Lotto 649 infers or implies that it's 6 numbers of 1 to 49, right? So you don't have to actually take any parameters in here. I'm actually using the system.out.println to pump out the toString method, returns a string that I'm going to use to pump out. Okay, that's what this is. So my driver class, by the way, is exactly the same for both iterations, for both the array list and the array type. Okay, I'm going to show you both. Sorry, guys, there's some strings. So you can see a little better. All right, so that's all there is in the program class. It's very, very simple. So I'm going to instantiate an object of type Lotto 649. Now, if I go to Lotto 649, we'll go back. We'll do it backwards, okay? So I would have done that. That would be one of my first classes I would make, right? That right there, if you look at the points from a point value perspective, right, is your driver class, which is worth 4 points. Just to do that, those 4 lines, or 2 lines actually, right? Ensure your output is properly formatted, all that kind of stuff. That's going to happen in your toString method, right? That's all that's happening. So you're going to get an extra 2 points there if you just use the toString method and you properly formatted everything, right? So that's 6 points for me just formatting my toString method, right? Okay, let's take a look at it though. Let's go back to the next piece. Okay, let's look at the interface. This is the interface method. Okay, so you get 1 line, public abstract int bonus number, right? For this, right? If you just did that one right there, so here's the iBonusNumber, it's 4 marks. So that's 8 marks out of 30 right now. If all you did was those 2 things, 8 marks out of 30, right? So you're almost there, you're almost a pass. You're getting there, you're getting closer, right? Or halfway to a pass, let's say, 25%, right? Okay, so those are the 2 things. Now, this is where the tough stuff gets in. Let's go to the Lotto Game or Lotto 649 one. So those 2 are the kind of the meat and bones. So I'm going to kind of put up my Lotto Game. So I asked you to put together some private variables. There it is, element number, set size, those 2 things, right? You're building your class here. There's a couple things here, number array and element array, right? Those two things are going to be the two arrays. If you notice, they're integer arrays, and they're both protected. Why? Because you need to have access to them later on. And I talked about this during the exam. I said you can make them protected. It doesn't have to be private. The only private ones you need to make are these ones. Now, what if I was to make getters and setters of this type? These are reference types. Getters and setters of reference types do what? If you set a reference type, or you get a reference type, you're actually getting the pointer to the reference. So either way, whether you make it protected, whether you make it public, whether you make it private, right, it's still accessing the reference type. So be very careful on how you do that stuff. Some people want to do that. Sorry? It's okay as long as you can access. All it's going to do is point to that reference type anyway. You're passing it by reference no matter what you do, right? You can't, unless you physically do a copy, right? From one to the other, you're not making a copy. You're just all you're doing is passing it by reference. So whether you do it like this, whether you do it with getters and setters, it's up to you. And you can make protected getters and setters as opposed to just public getters and setters, and that's perfectly fine. But you didn't have to. I didn't ask you to do that. This would have been perfectly good right here. All right, next, your constructor. So Lotto Game takes two objects, element number and set size. Okay, so those two things, and they're gonna assign these two parameters in the constructor of Lotto Game are gonna set the variables, the private instance variables that exist up here. Okay. There's the initialize method we're going to get to in a second, and the pick elements method, and those are the kind of the problems where everyone was having. Let's go back to where we're at right now, just to do this piece. So just this, setting up your structure, right? What do you get for that, if anything? Right? Some people asked me that today. So again, I said the instance variable number array should hold an array of integers from 1 to size of Lotto Game set size. Okay, could assume that you have other Lotto games in future iterations of your program. And this you get 2 marks for. So let's say you made the array, the number array, like I did, right? Which is here. This is the number array, right? Now it doesn't hold anything right now, right? It's not instantiating an object. This is just a reference to an integer array. That's all it is. If you just did this, it's a mark. Okay, just this, just putting it down, right? Going back. The number array will, with numbers from 1 to set size, it says you will initialize it. Okay, we're not going to go there. We haven't initialized anything. The instance variable element array will contain a number of elements equal to the element number, instance variable, and will contain your final numbers. So if all I do is mention that it has the element array, you get a mark out of 2. Right? So far, you did. You know, the other 4 marks for your program and 4 marks for your interface, plus these 2, 10 out of 30, right? I'm saying worst case if you didn't get any of this, right? Okay. Let's continue with the instantiate, the initialize method. Okay, so the initialize method, what I've done here with my arrays is, here's where I actually call the new keyword to initialize my array. Now there's different ways to initialize arrays. I'm using the array as an object right here. Now this is one of the ways you can do it. You can use the new keyword to say new integer array with a size of element number, right? So this is done when I call the initialize method, right? I don't do it up here. If I was to do it up here, you wouldn't know how big it is because you haven't received the element number or the set size. And that's what I saw people were doing, right? So you can't do it that way. You have to do it like this if you're going to have a variable set size and element number. Okay, the same thing with number array. So if you just initialize these two things, you get another couple marks. All right, pretty much. Give or take, probably half a mark or something like that. Now, if you look at this in terms of how I initialize the array, like I said, I'm using the array to set up a bunch of numbers inside of it. So if you notice, the number array is just going to hold numbers from 1 to the array length, which is in this particular case the set size. So if this would be 49, this would go to 49. So 1 to 49. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm counting from 1, right? Because my number array is actually set size plus 1. So if my set size is 49, I'm actually instantiating 50 elements. The reason why I'm making 50 is because I don't want to use the 0. I don't care about that 0 element. I'm tracking only on the 50, right? So then what I'm doing is, as I'm looping through, I'm initializing each iteration. I'm assigning a number to the array. Okay, that's what this is doing. Okay, so if you're watching, if you're trying to do this with me, try and put this together as we're doing it. It might be a good practice, so don't just watch, do. Otherwise you won't get what I'm doing. Okay, here's the clincher. This is where people go nuts when they see this kind of stuff, because this is a little bit of an algorithm, and I want to say that in a very loose way, right? Notoriously, people are bad with arrays because they don't know how to shift things around with arrays. So the first thing is we have a random number right here, right? The next is I hold another integer that's a random number element. So the random number, this RND element, remember from random numbers, it just holds the seed, right? That's all it is. It's just an object. But in order for me to get a random number, I've got to get the next integer of this random number sequence, which is a predetermined sequence. It's a pseudo-random number sequence that you're getting, right? So when I get the next integer, I need to assign it somewhere. And I'm assigning it to something I call random element. Okay? And the random element is going to be between 0 to 49, 0 to set size, plus 1. Right? So actually it doesn't include, it goes up to but does not include 49. Right? That's why I have to add the 1. So it goes from 1 to 49. That's what I get the random element. It's just a number that I'm going to get. A number between 1 and 49. Okay. And by the way, I'm doing this inside of a while loop. I'm doing this after I initialize the array. I initialize my array every time I call pick elements because I want to reinitialize or reset my object again and again so that the stack, if you will, that I'm using is reset. Okay. Now, while my index, which starts at 0, this is just the sentinel variable here, so I'm going to say sentinel variable from my while loop. The sentinel variable is required for a while loop, right? Remember? Because the while loop can't function without kind of a setting to start with. Remember, I'm not using a for loop, so you have to have a sentinel variable. So index starts at 0, okay? And I say, well, if my index, which is 0, is less than my element number, which it would be because I have 6 elements, right? Then loop. That's what I'm saying here. Okay, now I'm going to take my random element. I'm going to get my number from 1 to 49. And if I say this, if the number array, and I'm using the random element to index that array. So the index of the number array, which is a random number from 1 to 49, right? If it's not equal to my negative 1, right? If it's got a regular number there, right? Then it hasn't been chosen, right? Then I can choose it if it doesn't have a negative 1. So I say this element array index, right? Which is where I'm holding my my numbers, my final numbers, is equal to the random element number, the one I just generated. All I'm using the number array for is to check and keep track of if it's been selected or not. That's all I'm doing, right? And then what I'm saying is the one that I chose, the index that I chose in the number array, I'm setting it to -1 to flag that it's been chosen. So flag that number has been chosen. That's what I'm doing here, right? And actually, I'll put that little comment, which is funny. I thought I already had that one. Here's the flag, the number has been chosen, right? And if you notice up here, what I'm doing is I'm going to assign the random element I got to my element array, which is the final array that holds all my numbers, right? Here I'm checking, I'll say check if the random element has been chosen. If it hasn't, then that's good. Then assign it. If it has, then skip this if statement and loop again. Generate another random number. The only way I'm going to increase my index is if the one I'm checking has not been chosen. Okay, so I'm going to keep looping as long as I'm going to keep generating random numbers until I get an index that's not chosen. Once the index isn't chosen, then I'm moving on. This has nothing to do with interfaces. This has nothing to do with polymorphism. This has nothing to do with inheritance. This is everything to do with arrays and array manipulation, which you guys should know very well right now. Okay? So, leads me to believe that we need to do another remedial little array assignment, which we have already done actually for some of you in COMP228, which I'm perfectly willing to do again, to give you guys a little bit of a bonus to make up for some of this problem with the exam, because this is the heart and bones of it. Now, some of it, I know some people say that, we have to troubleshoot. It's not, I'm getting a new problem. This is your problem, so you know it, right? So you don't have to do much troubleshooting because you know what to do, right? It's true. There is troubleshooting involved, but the level of troubleshooting involved here is minimal, right? Because really what we're writing here is just an array of manipulating objects. If you haven't done this kind of thing before, if you've never done this type of array before, right, where you're manipulating it, if it's new to you and you've never used arrays to manipulate numbers, it's going to be a challenge because you've never done it before. But if you've done it before, it doesn't matter if I give it to you in Java and Python and whatever, it's the same. It's the same kind of manipulation you have to do. And all I'm doing is using my two arrays, one to hold a tally. Does it have, and you can hold it, has it been accessed or not? I could have made my array different. Instead of making it an integer array, I could have used a Boolean array of Boolean numbers, right? Or Boolean types, right? It's either true or false. If it's true, it's been chosen. If it's false, it hasn't been. And I can test here instead of setting it to -1, I can check to see if not this array element, if this not true. If it's not true, or I can check for false, whatever you want to do, right? Then then I can assign that number. The random element is what I'm really getting. I'm really assigning to my element array. I still need the second array as a storage vessel. That's all it is. The second one array is holding the numbers that I can check to see if they've been chosen, and the other array is just a storage area where I'm holding the final numbers. Okay, that's what it is. Now, there are many, many ways to write this, right? This is the one that came natural to me this afternoon when I wrote this thing. Okay, when you guys said, I want to see the solution, I said, okay, no problem. One thing I added, which was not in the exam, right, that would probably have given you a little bit of a bonus, was the sort method. I used the arrays.sort method to sort my final array in ascending order, right? That's what it does. Okay, that's what this Lotto game does, and this is all these things do. There's nothing else about this. And the initialize method is not called in the constructor. It's called here in pick elements. So every time I pick an element or pick a bunch of my numbers, you could have called this pick numbers, whatever you want to call it, right? At the end of the day, every time I do that, I want to reinitialize or reset the array structure, right? So that they're back to the original way they were, right? Otherwise, if I don't reset them, the object is still going to exist, right, that I'm creating, and they're still going to have the same numbers. Okay, let's go back. So that's Lotto game. Let's look at Lotto 649. Okay, here's the Lotto 649. Here's my constructor, like I showed you. That's all I did. 649, sending those. I am extending Lotto game and implementing iBonus number. Let's go back for the marking here for a second. So if you did all the stuff I just did in Lotto game, you're going to get full marks, right? And if you did the array sorting, you're going to get a bonus of 2 marks, right? Here's one. So here's my subclass, and what I'm asking you to do is it says it extends the Lotto game's abstract superclass and implements the iBonus interface. Okay. So just doing that alone, right? Even though this thing is worth 8 marks just by looking at this stuff, I'd probably just give you that 2 marks just for doing that. Worst case, if you didn't do anything else, right? So right there, worst case, if all you did was the interface, the driver class, and some basic things, you probably would have got 12 marks by now, right? Yeah. There is no benefit of using the interface. The interface is a contract that you make, right, to say that I promise I'm going to include these modules or methods or variables, right? I'm promising that I'm going to use them. The reason why I'm doing that is because it's structures. If it's just us and we've only written 100 lines of code here, it's no problem. But what if I'm working with a bunch of other programmers and we all want to program in the same way, especially use the same kind of classes, especially when it's more complex, right? And I'm not looking at 100 lines of code, I'm looking at 100,000 lines of code, which is more likely, right? So I have 100,000 lines of code and I want everyone to program in a certain way. What the interfaces do is they make us include certain other things, and because Java doesn't have multiple inheritance, let's say like C++ does, right? You need this additional push to add other elements into your subclasses that make them a little bit different from one another. An example would be this bonus number. I can make another class, let's say some other Lotto game that doesn't implement the bonus number, right? And maybe I wouldn't have the need of adding my bonus number in there, right? So those two classes both derive from the Lotto Game class, but one is being forced to make a bonus number method, and the other one isn't. So I'm promising, it's a promise, a contract that I'm making between me and the designer of the interface and the classes that I'm using, that I'm consuming, that I'm going to make use of that method. It's also a reminder for me to say, oh yeah, I got to have a method because it won't link properly. It won't do what I want it to do. But you don't have to use interfaces. In fact, you don't even have to use abstract classes. It helps to use abstract classes because now if I make a change to the abstract class, all my derived classes get changed automatically. One change to the abstract class, everything else gets changed. And there's ways we can do that. We can make sure, we can figure out ways of making it easy for us, for ourselves.
Then we use the interfaces in subclasses?
We make them in subclasses. We always use the interfaces in our subclasses, not in our abstract classes. Although you could. There's ways of, that's the thing, the flexibility is that you could make so that the interface itself, your abstract class is actually a subclass already. It's a subclass of the object superclass, right? So you could implement an interface.
And in interface, do we have any object?
No, there's nothing that's defined. The interface, if you look at the interface itself, right, if you're going back to the interface doesn't actually define the method. The method is just a declaration. I just declare the method, just the method signature, but I don't have a body to the method. The body you fill out inside your derived class, right? So the body actually could be different for each of these ones. I can inherit or use bonus number as an example in more than one derived class, but then implement the bonus number method differently. That's another reason to have it so that it's not declared, because maybe the bonus number method is going to vary between one derived class and another, right? So it gives us flexibility. It's just a contract. Not everyone understands how to use them or why they're used. A lot of times it's for structure. We want to structure or define the shape of our class ahead of time to force people to have format or structure. Otherwise, what happens is everyone does things differently, and then the pieces don't meld together right.
But not here in this case.
Oh, in this case, we do. We force you to, because I'm forcing you here to use the bonus number method. And that's what I'm doing in my Lotto 649. When I implement my bonus number, you need to put this line just like this. I extend a Lotto Game, which means I'm inheriting from Lotto Game, this other class, and I'm implementing bonus number, which means I'm making a contract to say that I'm going to include this other method called bonus number, which is right here. This is the bonus number method that I'm implementing, right? Okay, let's take a look at this. So how do I do this bonus number stuff anyway? So the bonus number, it's very similar to the pick elements. And I know that Ravina was saying, it's a lot of code duplication. I don't like it, right? Well, it's not really code duplication in that it doesn't do everything the same, but it's very similar to the pick elements array or pick elements method, right? So all it's going to do is set up another random number. And now what I'm doing is I'm checking before it's cleared. So before I call pick elements again, right? What I'm doing is I'm getting another element and I'm checking to see if it's been flagged. If it's been flagged because I haven't cleared, I haven't initialized, it still has my flags there, so I know it's been chosen. So it's just a natural thing. It's an extra number I'm getting, as opposed to the 1 to 46 of 149. This is the 7th number, right? And it's a bonus number. It means that we could use it in place of the other ones. Okay. So that's all it does. It's very similar to the other one. And if you notice, I'm doing the same kind of array stuff. I'm going, here's my random element, check to see if this random element, using random element as my index, look at the number array to see if that element in the array, right, has been flagged as I've seen it. And if it hasn't been flagged, then set the number that I'm going to return from my method. I'm just returning a number, right, which is an integer. Set the number to the random element. That's the number that I'm going to use for my bonus number, right? And then make sure that I flag it. I just do this as a check. I don't need to do this because I'm probably going to reinitialize. But I'm going to flag the number that I chose as chosen. Now this you don't have to do, and if you didn't put this line in, it wouldn't do it wouldn't affect anything. I put it in for good measure because that's the structure I like. Okay, cool. So I got my bonus number working, and now here's my override. I need to use, well, you can choose not to use the add override. It's good practice to use add override, right? Which says I want to override the generic built-in toString method, right? And here I'm kind of initializing my output. I define an output variable with kind of null, equivalent to what null would be, or an empty string is what it really is. And here's my set number. I kind of create a set number of 5, just a variable instead of putting a solid 5. And then I kind of set some structure around the output. So I kind of, it's a little bit of frills, little boxes that I'm boxing the output. And now this is the heart and bones of it. I say there's 2 for loops. Here's the outer for loop, and here's the inner for loop. In the outer for loop, what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, start the count at 0. And keep counting until you reach set number, which is 5. So I'm going to do 5 iterations, right? So call the pick elements method. Good. Now that I've called the pick elements method, it's initialized my arrays. It's assigned the elements into my element array, right? And now I can access it because element array is a protected object. I can access it and I can say, well, here's my second for loop. All right. For every element, I start at element 0 in the array, and for every element, as long as the element number that we're looking at is less than the element array length, increment the element number. So let's do the incrementing. Right, here's my for loop. If my element, before I do anything, I check to see if my element is greater than 0. So if it's not the first element, add in a comma and a space for my formatting. Otherwise, add this element, the number, right, to my output, which is a string. So the number that I'm getting from my element array, which is from 1 to 49, I've got a bunch of them, I got 6 of them. Add each of those numbers into my output string and build my string with commas in between everything. At the end, add my bonus number, right? Here's my bonus number. And then add this output and the /n is just a new line character, and return this as output. That's what my toString method does. This is the kind of what formats my output. And then in the program, I take the formatted output and then I output it to the command line. Let's take a look and see how this works. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to my array method, and I get my list. Right? So you notice now I've sorted it, so it's 3, 23, 33, 37, 41, 43, with a bonus of 38. Okay, and if I refresh, if I just do it again, I get another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And they're all sorted, and they're all bonused. That's what you should get with 5 sets of numbers using arrays. Okay, let's take a look at this again, but from the Arraylist perspective, if you're going to go do it that way. And again, this would have taken me, I did both in an hour, so this would probably take me the bulk of it, let's say 30 minutes, which I assumed it would probably take you 30 minutes or whatever. Now, you don't know it's my code, right? So for you, it'd probably take double the time, let's say, or even triple the time, right? So you still should have been able to do this if you know about arrays. If you don't know about arrays, if you're not good at doing arrays, then it's going to take you longer. If not, you probably never do it at all, right? Because there's some manipulation here. Now, what if you don't know arrays, but you really know Arraylists? And Arraylists are much simpler, but they take a little bit of setting up. Okay, and we'll talk about them in a bit. Okay, so let's take a look at the Arraylist method. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my sources, and let's take a look. By the way, if you did all that and you outputted this nicely like this, again, this would be, what I'm showing you here is 100%, plus some bonuses that I've added in. So 100 and a bit, 101, right? Okay, let's talk about the thing. So again, from my midterm Arraylist method, let's take a look at this program file. The program file is identical. There's no difference in the way I implement it. So my driver class is identical. And so is my bonus number. It's identical. There's nothing different except for a little space that I could have added in for clarity, right? At the end of the day, there's one line of code here and the declaration. That's it, right? For both those two things, no difference. The difference lies in the Lotto game itself. If I look at Lotto game, Now we're looking at a couple different things. The declaration for an array list, you have to declare it like this with these angle brackets, right? So you say protected, I'm making it protected again, same way as I did the array. Array list, you have to declare array list. An integer as an object, not the int. You can't put int in there. You have to make it integer, string, float with a capital F, and so on. And then what I'm doing is I'm declaring it, I've just changed the name so it's for us, for our purposes, not for my exam, as a number array list. So we know it's an array list. We're using the array list methods instead of the array methods, right? Okay, my constructor is identical. There's nothing different here. So if you just did this piece, if you're able to do this setup, you got your bonus because you're using an array list. So you're going to get I'm going to give you a bonus of 2 points, right? Just doing this. All right, now the initialization. It's identical. The only thing I'm doing here is I'm using the Arraylist syntax as opposed to the array, right? So I initialize here. Here's where it changes. Instead of me going through the for loop, right, and where I'm going from 1 to set size or whatever, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm adding my set size. I'm using the add method to add whatever the number is, which is 0 to 49. Plus 1, because I don't want to start at 0, I want to start at 1. Right? So from 1 to set size. I could have done it the other way. I could have said sort of from 1 to set size minus 1, right? Or whatever. Or 1 to set size plus 1. I could have done that too. I think this way is the better way to do it. And all I'm doing is I'm adding, when I add to the array list, all I'm doing is I'm think about the array list as an empty container, right? And all I'm doing is I'm sticking in like an object, which happens to be an integer object. It's just in there now, right? So I've kind of added 1 in. And that integer is going to have a value, the value of 1. It's going to be in the first position. That's what it's going to be, right? Okay, cool. And I keep doing that 49 times. I just stack the array up with different numbers, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 49, right? The array right now, my array list, array list holds 49 numbers after this is done, okay? So my initialization is done. Nothing has changed here. I'm still initializing. The only difference is that my checks, which is where it becomes a little bit easier for me, are a lot easier. Let's take a look. Here's a little bit of more of a compressed method. That's why it's easier, right? I use my pick elements method. I still do the random number. I still do my random element. I still set my num array size to 0. This is something new. So my number array size is 0. And the reason why is because I don't want to do this number array list size method inside my for loop. Notice I have a for loop, not a while loop. Why? It's easier. I can go for int where index is 0, where an index is less than the total element number, so 6 elements as an example, right? And I'm going to loop through for 6 times. Now I don't have to check to see if it's there or not because I'm going to remove it. And this big honking line right here is the main meat and bones of it all. All right? This is where it becomes a little bit more complex. That's why I give you the bonus when you start using the array. Why? The array list. Even though it's easier, and I'm getting the sets, I'm using size instead of length. I'm using the size method instead of length. I'm taking my random number, right, and I'm saying get, the number between 0 and the number array size, 0 to 49, because now I'm looking at the 0th element in my array list, which is 1. To the 49th element of my array list, which is 49, right, or 48th element, which is 49, right? I'm looking at those two things. I don't have to do plus 1 or whatever because it's a stacked list, right? That's how it is. It doesn't have a length. It has a size. It's a totally different thing. I can add to it as many times. Almost think about an array list as a deck of cards, right? And the deck, I'm just putting more elements in there, more into that container. Right? Now what I'm doing is I'm using the remove element, the remove method, to pluck that card out. So if I have 0 to 49 or 1 to 49, and I choose by random number, my random element says I should choose 17, I go to the 17th place, I take that card and pop it out. Now guess what? My array list just dropped in size, and that's one thing you can't do with an array. I've just changed the size of my array list, which I'm going to regenerate right here every iteration. So my num array size is going to change my size, which means the next random number is not going to include the one that I just took out. So I never have to check for it. It's a fixed length, right? So I've just popped that element out, right? I've got it, and I assign it I add it into my array, my element array list. I use the add method to take that element, that number, the value, and pop it into my other array list. So I go from one array list to the other in one line. Right? That's what this does. So again, it's a little bit more efficient, this code, right? And a little bit more sexy than the other way. It's a little bit easier in my mind to conceptualize it. The problem with arrays is you have to think about other methods, and it's not contextual like the array list is. Array list is more contextual. It makes sense because you're moving objects around. I'm taking an element from the array list. Now that element doesn't exist. Now I can't get that element anymore. There's a fixed number of elements. It's like a deck of cards. And actually in the book, there's a deck of cards example that does the exact same thing, right? Okay, I want to sort my collection, but because ArrayList is a collection type, I need to use collections.sort to sort my array list. Again, this is not what I've asked you to do. This would be bonus in the bonus, right? Second bonus, right? So I've got my first bonus, I'm using my array list, and the second bonus here because I'm sorting my array list, right? Okay. Let's go into my Lotto 649, and I'll give you this in a second, Celino, on the break. I'll let you look at it. Here's my Lotto 649. Identical constructor, no difference, right? Still implements the bonus number. It still extends the Lotto game, okay? And when I look at my bonus number, right, it does very similar things to what we did with my pick element method from my Lotto game, right? However, it goes one even simpler. I don't have to even loop it here. There's no loop here at all. All I'm doing is I'm saying, here's my number array size, right? And I'm saying my random element is a number between 0 and the array size, but not including the array size, right, which would be 49. So between 0 and 48. So as an example, still 49 elements, right? And then I'm going to say, well, my number that I'm returning is the one that I'm removing from the number array list. So I'm popping an element out, and I'm assigning it to number, and then I'm returning it. That's the one I'm returning from my bonus number. Okay? Very straightforward. Actually, a lot easier to conceptualize than it is to do the array. Because from array, remember I had set the thing to -1, and I had duplicated a little bit of code, and all the stuff that Ravina hates, right? So we don't want to do it that way. Okay, now, here's my toString. It's very similar. The only difference is instead of element array dot length, I'm using element array dot size, right? Because the size is the method that we have to use as part of this collection. And when we do an output, we need to use the get method to get the element out of the array without deleting it. The get method reads the element and pops it into the output. That's what it does. But other than that, it's identical again to my output. And when I run it, let me just go back to my program. And if I run that, here's my ArrayList method. It's identical, and you can tell the difference because it's 5 sets of numbers using ArrayList. And if I kind of run it again and again and again, you can see that the numbers flow nicely. Okay? Questions around this? I know it looks easy when I show it to you because I'm showing it to you and I know what I'm doing, right? But truly, this isn't a hard exam. This wasn't a hard exam. This was an exam to test a couple things, and I apologize to Tim in advance because I said, it's not going to be crazy arrays, and it ended up being crazy arrays for him, right, and for other people. But one of the things I have to do is continue, we kind of have to wrap our minds around this stuff with Java because we're going to do a lot of array manipulation with our going forward, especially with Android, when you guys do Android, and especially with things like your GUI tools. There's going to be an array of elements that you're going to keep track of, or an array list, and you're going to need to know how to do that. So it's not like we haven't talked about this before. However, what I'm willing to do is I'm going to put together a little assignment next day, right, to make up for this kind of stuff, because I never want any of my students to suffer, and I know a lot of you suffered during the exam today, right? And plus there's a pile of exams that you had to do today too, probably was extra stress, right? So I'll give you a little assignment that I'm going to do that's just going to be on arrays, and if you complete it, it'll be a bonus assignment that'll add on to your final mark. Okay? People who did excellent on this assignment, at the end of the day, their final mark is going to be over 100%, and I don't care. as long as you guys get a raise, that's important to me. I want you guys to understand this. I'm not doing the exam to kill you. This isn't what we're doing here. For the most part, polymorphism and interfaces and all that kind of stuff, they're very straightforward. We've demonstrated this, but we need some kind of meat to make the interfaces and the polymorphism make sense, right? Otherwise, what am I going to give you, right? Or calculations. People get lost in the calculations too. That would have been the other way I could have gone. I could have said, okay, I'm going to give you a big calculation question, and if you don't do the interfaces and abstract methods properly, then the calculation will be wrong, right? And all I have to do is test for your calculation. If your answer is wrong, then you didn't do it right, right? I disagree with that method. It's better to do this for me, okay? This says everything. This is interfaces. This is polymorphism. Everything. The array, but you don't have to know. This is all you need to do with polymorphism and interfaces, right? As long as you understand that when we use inheritance, right, that I'm going to create a class, right? Here's my Lotto Game class. This is an abstract class that never gets instantiated, right? This class is just a blueprint, right? And then my Lotto 649 class, I'm extending the Lotto Game class, which means Lotto 649 is a Lotto Game. That's what it is. It has that relationship. It has everything that Lotto Game has, right? We can treat it as a Lotto Game, right? And it implements the iBonus number behavior, right? Which allows me to, or forces me to create this bonus number method. That's what it does. As long as you understand those things and you take that away from the exam, I'm happy. The rest, the array stuff, obviously there's a hole in your knowledge. I know I talked to a couple of people that said, I never did arrays, right? In COMP228, or I never did array lists in COMP228, and this is all new stuff. Okay, that means that there's a hole somewhere and we got to patch it up. And I'm willing to do that patchwork. I don't care. I want you guys to be successful. Now we've done it before, and Ravina and Tim are looking at me going, it's exactly the problem we had in COMP123, right? But you're going to see this stuff. It's not going to go away, guys. Arrays and array lists. If you want to be a developer, you need to know this stuff, right? So you're going to get tested again and again and again. It's going to hit you a couple times. So you need to be very comfortable with it, okay? Okay, I'm going to pause the movie here, take a short break, and come back with the real stuff we're supposed to do, which is UI, right?